Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly, and this is Vote Her In. Vote Her In is a collaboration between Two Broads Talking Politics and Rebecca Sive. And Rebecca, of course, is the author of Vote Her In, Your Guide to Electing Our First Woman President. I am coming from Ohio here. You can see a slightly different background if you watch. Usually I'm in Chicago. I'm in Ohio, so another part of the heartland, and we're going to talk about the importance of the Midwest here. So I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca now to introduce our Midwest guest.
Absolutely, Kelly. It's really kind of neat. I'm in Michigan. I'll give it away right now. Our guest is in Wisconsin, but most of you already know that because you tuned in especially to hear from Sarah about her race for the U.S. Senate and in the Democratic primary in Wisconsin. And we're really excited to have this Heartland conversation and women in the Midwest, why we're running, what we're trying to accomplish. I want to just acknowledge at the outset a mutual friend of Sarah's and mine, who is an amazing woman, Megan Christensen, who is a wonderful activist. And she and Sarah, I believe, met during the Hillary Clinton campaign. And so here we are, just a few years later, all of us like sticking to it, right? And keeping on moving in every way we can. So welcome, Sarah. Sarah is in the primary, as I mentioned, in Wisconsin. She's recently been endorsed by Emily's List, which is terrific. And we're just going to jump in and, as we typically do, ask Sarah, because our own personal stories about how we got to this place and how we made these decisions are just so important. So we're going to begin by, if you would, Sarah, sharing with us sort of what your route was. And I will just say to our listeners that I saw something referencing student body president, but I guess there was more both before and after. So welcome, and let's just go for it.
Well, thank you, Rebecca and Kelly, for having me. It is so great to be here with you this evening, talking about women running for office in the Midwest. I mean, I feel like the only thing we need is some cheese curds and beer, and this would be like quintessential Wisconsin. But yeah, I'll be honest. I think like so many women, I did not think I would ever be where I am today. Like I wasn't one of those kids in middle school that was drawing, American flags and had the Constitution memorized and said, I'm going to be Wisconsin's next senator. But with that said, I was always really community oriented. I mean, my parents were public school teachers, and when we'd see trash on the highway, I was that kid that wanted to start a club where we would pick up trash and then go recycle it, and then we would take that money and give it to the homeless shelter. We had a big wolf population issue in Wisconsin. And so my second grade adopted a wolf pack, and I helped fundraise, and we educated people about it, because that's what you do, is that when you see something wrong, you got to stand up and do something about it. And I think that's really how I've lived my entire career. I mean, I never thought I would be an elected official. And here I am now, the state treasurer of Wisconsin. And it was because Scott Walker was trying to get rid of the state treasurer's office. Right. In 2018, there was this constitutional amendment that he put on the ballot because, Rebecca and Kelly, who needs checks and balances in government? I mean, it's like firing your chief financial officer and then giving those responsibilities to your CEO. I mean, we would never do that in business. So why do we think that's good government? And I found myself leading a constitutional amendment to save the state treasurer's office because I believed Wisconsin needed a state treasurer. And then when that happened, we won that amendment, by the way, with 63% of the vote, which, as all of us in purple states know, that is a landslide victory. And so the question was, well, who's going to run for it? And I remember my grandma, actually, I was thinking about her when I was debating what I should do. And she said to me about public service. She was actually part of the first group of women to serve during World War II. And when I was asking her about her public service, she said, Sarah, take this advice. Ask for forgiveness, not for permission. Mm-hmm. And I think there's so many of us that relate to that. And so I just threw my hat in and ran for state treasurer. And it was, through that experience this past year that has really led me now to run for US Senate, because I just got sick and tired of watching Ron Johnson peddle conspiracy theories and not actually care about the millions of people in our state who were struggling during COVID. They were underemployed and unemployed through no fault of their own. And here I am as state treasurer trying to be scrappy without any additional resources from the federal government or from the state to kind of keep people in their homes, to help small businesses, to even work and help finance essential services. And here's Ron Johnson single-handedly holding up $1,400 checks, money for small businesses, and trying to expand the vaccination program. And I'm like, is this guy not talking to Wisconsinites? Because if he was, he would realize they need help. And I just couldn't sit on the sidelines. I believe that our state actually deserves someone who's going to focus on kitchen table issues. And so that's how I got in this race. And I remember talking to my husband about it. And I'm like, I am just getting so frustrated about this. And he's like, well, what are you going to do about it, Sarah? And I'm like, yeah, that's a good question. And he's like, so here we are. Now I, a few months later announced my candidacy for US Senate.
So let's talk some about those kitchen table issues and the issues that are driving you and your campaign. And, Ron Johnson isn't listening to Wisconsinites. So as you listen to Wisconsinites, what are you hearing? What's driving you and the people in the state?
I mean, I think it is very clear that they want actually someone who's going to go to Washington and get things done. I mean, when I announced my candidacy and we were getting ready to kind of make a video about it, and I got a call from a Republican that I know, and he's like, can I be in your video? And I go, I'm running for US Senate as a Democrat. And he goes, I'm over it, Sarah. I'm over Ron Johnson. I have voted for him twice, and I don't believe he stands for my values anymore. And I want someone who I know has the same quality, family, equality type values that I do. And he goes, that's you. And so he is in this video. And what for him, the straw that broke the camel's back was the insurrection. And we watched our democracy be attacked. It was not a peaceful protest, as Ron Johnson likes to talk about. I mean, he makes it sound like, we were all there at Disney World with our signs. I mean, it was literally a domestic terrorist attack. And we are seeing people be charged accordingly. But Ron Johnson is in complete denial of that. And our democracy is at stake. And so whether it is the lies about January 6th to even junk science. I mean, he was denies that climate change even exists. I mean, it is someone who says Greenland was green. And here we are, in the state of Wisconsin, we've had erratic weather just like everybody else. We're having fires and floods that are literally wiping out the nutrients for our farmers and causing incredible damage in communities with construction. And even our water quality we're seeing blue-green algae that is just popping up from heat. And this is a real challenge. And yet we have somebody that can't even accept the basic premise of science behind this. And so there's some real issues that people are facing, and Ron Johnson just isn't talking about it and isn't doing anything about it in Washington.
So we look at Washington and we see people there like Ron Johnson. The best way we can put it is he's not paying attention. At the worst, he's doing incredible harm and damage, not only to people in Wisconsin, but across the heartland and across America. So I wondered if you could talk a bit about why you view Wisconsin and this election and as so important nationally, and important, for instance, to the Biden-Harris administration and the issues that are a priority for them.
Well, as I like to kind of talk about it, Rebecca, is that we don't want to relive our past. And Wisconsin has a past of Joe McCarthy. And we all saw the Red Scare and how he took the entire country down this embarrassing witch hunt. And when I think about that past, I now think about McCarthyism 2.0 with Ron Johnson. I mean, Ron Johnson is right now perpetuating, whether it is voter fraud, for example, and talking about how the election was rigged, to going back and questioning the effectiveness of vaccines. I mean, he literally did a press conference here in Wisconsin not too long ago questioning, like, is it really effective? And are we being honest about this stuff? And we know, I mean, there was a sign actually in my neighborhood that says, got polio? Think a vaccine. I mean, when you think about it, why our rates have been down in COVID? Think science, think a vaccine. And this is someone who literally uses his platform to perpetuate disinformation. And as somebody, for example, who spent some time in national security, how he's even talking about Russia and the Ukraine is absolutely ridiculous and quite frankly embarrassing. And he's doing all of this meanwhile while, you know, we are having Wisconsinites are struggling to, we have below the national average for home ownership. We know more women are out of the workforce. Last time we saw women's workforce participation was in the 1980s. And yet there's nothing, he's not talking about how to make lives of Wisconsinites better. And I think that is something that is not just true for Wisconsin, but Rebecca, going back to your point, it's true for the entire country. And we know the Senate right now is holding on by simply one vote, and that's it. And so we've got to strengthen that majority so we can get things like, you know, the For the People Act through. That's going to be protecting voting rights and getting money out of politics. And when we talk about the care economy, I mean, these are things that Ron Johnson isn't talking about. And he single-handedly, for example, tried to uphold the passing of Juneteenth as a federal holiday. I mean, even Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz supported the Juneteenth federal holiday, and Ron Johnson single-handedly said, I don't want to recognize that. I mean, that is critical to our history and learning who we are and understanding how we need to be better as a country. And so these are real issues that I think not only are affecting Wisconsin, but quite frankly, affecting the nation.
You know, just to follow up on one piece of news from today, and I wondered if you might want to comment on it. I think the Senate Democrats came together, and this is, of course, important to seniors in Wisconsin and across the whole country, to put together a funding package to expand Medicare, to include dental and vision. And, you know, that to me struck me as just a huge, wonderful, you know, history-making accomplishment that, for instance, a Democratic senator from Wisconsin could be a part of.
Yeah, no, Rebecca, I am really glad that you highlighted that, because we have a aging population that is growing faster than the national average here in Wisconsin. And in fact, we are seeing that right now with our retirement security, for example. So by doing nothing with retirement here in the state of Wisconsin and allowing the status quo to continue, we're going to see 400,000 seniors in poverty by 2030. And that's going to cost the state over $3 billion. And part of that, and really addressing it, is medical costs. I mean, that continues to be out of control. And when if you're living off of your Social Security alone, which in Wisconsin, that's about $1,200 a month, between food, rent, maybe your home, a car, and then your prescription drugs, which continue to go up despite the best benefits of what Medicare is doing. And then you've got dental and your hearing aids. I mean, it's just out of control. And so I think what we are seeing in this package by expanding these benefits in Medicare is a good first step. But I think we've got to take it one step further. I mean, something that we need to see and that Senator Ron Johnson's not talking about is we've got to lower the price of prescription drugs. I mean, I was talking with a senior not too long ago who was sharing how they were skipping their drugs that they're supposed to be taking every day. So instead, this person takes it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and skips Tuesday, Thursday, and the weekends because they can't afford it. I mean, this is the United States of America, and we are the richest country in the world, and yet our citizens are skipping life-saving drugs because they can't afford it. But yet on the front end, we're paying for that research and development and making that life-saving drug happen. But then on the back end, we're not able to negotiate and to best serve our citizens. I mean, this is a real problem and something that we've got to address head on and get through the Senate and change it.
You mentioned a little bit earlier that your background in security and national security. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, your work in the Pentagon, sort of what brought you to that and how that helps inform the kind of U.S. Senator that you'll be.
Well, okay, I will tell you, you can only imagine a 20-something-year-old woman from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, walking into what we called the five-sided castle, i.e. the Pentagon. I mean, literally, I think that when I walked in, my first office was in the E ring. And I don't know if you're not familiar, it's literally the outer ring of the Pentagon. And when I walked into my first office, I think they're like, we'll give her a couple weeks and we'll see how she lasts. Because it was basically me and a bunch of men. And not only did I last a few weeks, a few months, I lasted a few years. During my time, I was almost there for 8 years total. And it was a real experience that honestly helped me find my voice. Because what I realized is a lot of times I was the only woman in the room, and I was the only woman that was under 50. And I think having these conversations and just bringing a different perspective was invaluable. And for me, that is something that I've kind of carried with me ever since, is when you are in a room, making sure you have diverse voices at the table, because that helps ensure the best policies possible, and not being afraid to use that voice. And so as the saying goes, if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. I really lived that throughout my time in national security, and making sure that that voice was a part of the conversations for the people that I had the ability to serve in these different roles, and just making sure and it really just, I think, helped make a difference.
You know, when we talk about the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, it makes me think about, I think, probably our favorite topic on this show for all of you, which is the role of women in executive positions in government, whether elected or appointed. And I'm wondering whether you have observations about that based on your experience, or how you see potentially, if you're elected to the Senate, your own executive role, for instance, eventually, I guess, given seniority, as the chair of a committee. I imagine that's something you've been thinking a bit about.
Yeah, so that was probably the final straw for me, Rebecca, in getting in this race is, being the state treasurer, I want to look at the finances, because I really believe what we fund defines our values and who we are as a country. So when the CARES Act was passed, being my, financial nerd that I am, I'm like, what are we funding? Like, let's peel back the onion and really look under the hood to understand what we are funding. And when I realized that we gave Delta Airlines more money than we gave the entire country for childcare, I'm like, this is a real problem. Because why are women out of the workplace? Because they had to make a decision about, paid family leave, or, staying home, or they couldn't find quality, affordable childcare during this pandemic, as childcare centers were closing because they didn't have the resources they needed to stay open safely. And to me, when you look up at the makeup of the Senate, how many young working moms do you see at that table? And when I talk about things like paid family leave and affordable childcare as critical policies that are essential to economic security across this country, sometimes people will come back to me and say, well, that's a luxury. And I go, it's a luxury for who? Because it's not a luxury for women and people of color. I mean, they're the ones that are literally trying to decide what to do. It's not that they don't want a career, but their career doesn't allow them to have a family, or they have to make a decision to take care of a sick parent or to not get paid for their job. And so to me, these aren't luxuries. These are absolutely critical policies. And I believe when we have more working moms at the U.S. Senate table, that will change. And so that is another reason why I'm front and center in this race, because I feel like we have to bring that to the forefront.
I just flashed on the first year of the woman, so to speak, and Patty Murray was the mom in tennis shoes. I guess you were a little kid when, or maybe Kelly was too, but when that all happened. But it's there aren't enough of them. That is for absolute certain.
Yeah. And I think part of what I hope comes out of this is normalizing working moms in these roles. I mean, I think like a lot of listeners, we all have had that experience where you get a call because your child is sick or your parent is sick if you have elderly parents, and you have to go leave work to go take care of them. And it's like, Sarah, you should better manage your time. Like, why are you shouldn't be having to do that? But then the husband gets a call and gets his kid, and you're the best dad ever. Wow. Or, you bring your kids into work because your child care provider was sick or they had strep. And so you don't have any backup plans. A lot of us don't. And so you bring your kids into work because you have nothing else to do. And they're like, really? You're bringing your kid into work? But yet often if a man does that, it's like, you're the best. What a great caring dad. And so I think for me, part of this is normalizing what working families look like, because I think that's really important. I had to, not too long ago, give a speech, and things just happened in my house. And at the time, my son was, I believe, 12 months old. And I didn't know, like, we were at breakfast. And so I just had him with me as I was giving this speech, because I think it's normalizing what working families look like and deal with every single day.
So we, of course, have lots of women listeners who may think about running for office or getting involved in politics themselves. Do you have advice that you would like to give them?
So when I was little, something that my dad always used to say to me, and it still resonates today, is that failure is never fatal and success is never final. And I say that because for any woman who is interested in running, like, throw your hat in. And it may not work out once, it may not work out twice, but you'll get there, you'll change the conversation. And that's, to me, what really matters at the end of the day, is putting yourself out there. And you might have really great successes. That's great, but you can't just rest on those either. You have to keep fighting and continuing to make progress. And so it is by no means an easy thing to do, to run for office, but I think that it is incredibly important. Look, like, we need more and more women to help really drive the conversation. I will never forget. I mean, I went to this it's called Girls State in high school. And it's where girls are through the American Legion, get to participate in like this pretend government, and you run for office. And I remember when I was selected from my high school to go, I was talking to a group of boys, and they were like, women don't run for office. And I was like, what? And they're like, well, look, Wisconsin at the time didn't have a senator or governor or anything like that. And so they're like, I mean, Sarah, look, there's proof that women don't run for office. And I think we've got to show women that they can. And this is really important. And I will never forget then going down to this girl's state, how I met a bunch of other women who cared about their community. And then that's when I found out actually about Tammy Baldwin, because at the time she was running for Congress, and she was our first female representative to Congress, and that women actually can do this, and their voice and their perspective matters. And so if nothing else, it's also about being a role model for children and other women in the community and across the country.
And just think that if Wisconsin has 2 women senators, it'll be in a pretty wonderful, albeit too small club. So we're going to, from here in Michigan and here in Ohio and everywhere people are listening, we're going to be rooting for Wisconsin. And we thank you for sharing your ideas about Wisconsin and women across the country with us, Sarah. It's really a treat to be with you. So happy trails on the campaign trail to you.
Well, thank you, Rebecca and Kelly, for shining a spotlight and the work that you do every day to lift up women's voices. It's really, really important. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.